She was only 8 years old when she found the ladder buried beneath the snow, descending into darkness, leading to a secret that powerful men had killed to protect. A secret that would expose a conspiracy poisoning an entire town and reveal the truth about how her mother really died. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The mountain town of Pine Ridge, Montana, sat tucked between peaks that scraped the winter sky like broken glass. Population 2,347, or at least that's what the faded sign claimed at the town limits. Most folks figured it was closer to 2,000 now. People had been leaving for years, chasing jobs in bigger cities, fleeing the slow death of a place that used to matter. The mines had closed in 2008. The lumber mill followed in 2012. What remained was a skeleton of a town held together by stubbornness, nostalgia, and the kind of people too rooted to leave even when leaving made sense. Emma Chen was 8 years old, small for her age, with dark hair that her father always forgot to braid properly, and eyes that carried more weight than any child should know. She lived with her father, Marcus Chen, in a narrow 2-story house on Maple Street, where the porch sagged on one side and the gutters had been broken since before she was born. The house still smelled like her mother sometimes, vanilla and lavender, though it had been 2 years since the accident. 2 years since Marcus came home from the search with his face hollow and his hands shaking, telling Emma that Mama wasn't coming back, that the mountains had taken her. Marcus worked 3 jobs now: morning shift at the hardware store, afternoon snow removal for the county, nights doing bookkeeping for local businesses from the kitchen table while Emma slept upstairs. He was 41 but looked 50, his hair graying at the temples, his shoulders permanently hunched like he was carrying something invisible and crushing. Before Sarah died, before everything fell apart, he'd been a volunteer with Mountain Search and Rescue. He knew these woods better than most. He'd saved 17 people over 12 years. But he couldn't save his wife. That failure lived in his chest like a stone. Emma didn't talk much anymore, not like she used to. Her 3rd-grade teacher, Miss Holloway, said she was bright but distant, present but not really there. She turned in her homework on time, sat quietly at her desk, and spent recess alone by the fence, drawing pictures in a notebook her mother had given her. Pictures of mountains, trees, and a woman with long dark hair who smiled like sunlight. Emma carried that notebook everywhere, tucked into her worn purple backpack alongside the small camera her mother used to take on hikes. It was old, a Canon from the early 2000s, but it still worked. Emma had checked. December in Pine Ridge meant snow. Not the gentle postcard kind, but the suffocating, relentless kind that buried cars, collapsed roofs, and kept people indoors for weeks. The 22nd of December 2025 started like any other winter day. Emma woke to frost patterns on her bedroom window, pulled on 2 pairs of socks because the heating barely reached the 2nd floor, and came downstairs to find her father already gone. A note on the counter, written in his rushed handwriting: "Oatmeal in the pot. Bus at 7:45. Love you, kiddo. Be safe." She ate alone, the kitchen silent except for the tick of the old wall clock and the groan of pipes struggling against the cold. The oatmeal was thick and tasteless, but she finished it anyway, washed her bowl, and grabbed her backpack. Outside, the sky hung low and grey, pregnant with storms the weather report had been warning about for days. Emma didn't mind the cold. Sometimes it felt easier to be numb on the outside, too. School passed in a blur of math worksheets and a history lesson about Lewis and Clark that Emma barely registered. She sat by the window in the back row and watched the snow begin to fall just after lunch. Soft at first, delicate flakes drifting past the glass like whispered secrets. But by the time the final bell rang at 3:15, the world outside had transformed. The snow fell thick and fast, a wall of white that swallowed the playground, the parking lot, the distant mountains. The wind howled against the building, rattling windows, shaking the old bones of Pine Ridge Elementary. Principal Davison made an announcement over the intercom, his voice crackling with static. Attention students and staff, due to deteriorating weather conditions, we are implementing early dismissal. All buses will depart immediately. Students walking home, please proceed with caution and stay on main roads. Emma pulled on her coat, a hand-me-down from a cousin that was too big in the sleeves, and stepped into the storm. The wind hit her like a fist, stealing her breath, stinging her cheeks. She pulled her hood tight and started walking. Her house was only 12 blocks away, a route she'd walked 100 times, down Birch Street, left on Pine, straight through to Maple, 40 minutes on a good day, maybe an hour in the snow. But the storm had other plans. Within 10 minutes, the world became unrecognizable. The snow fell so thick Emma could barely see 5 feet ahead. Street signs vanished. Landmarks disappeared. The wind screamed through the trees, bending them like broken fingers. She kept walking, one foot in front of the other, trying to follow the sidewalk. But the snow had already buried it, erasing the line between road and yard, between safe and lost. Emma's hands ached inside her mittens. Her face burned with cold. She thought about her mother, about the last hike they'd taken together before the accident. Sarah had taught her things that day, how to read the sun's position, how to follow water downhill, how to stay calm when you're scared. Fear makes you stupid, her mother had said, kneeling in the dirt, eyes serious. But calm makes you smart. Remember that, baby? Emma tried to stay calm now, but panic crept in like frost through cracks. Nothing looked familiar. She should have reached the turn onto Pine Street by now, but there was no street, just endless white. She turned around, thinking maybe she'd missed it, but her footprints had already vanished, erased by the storm. The world spun. Which way was home? Which way was anywhere? She kept walking because stopping meant freezing. Her legs burned, her lungs ached. The temperature was dropping fast, single digits now, maybe lower with the wind. She stumbled over something buried in the snow, fell hard, her hands sinking deep into powder. When she tried to stand, her boot caught on a root or a rock, and she went down again, this time sliding, tumbling down an embankment she didn't know was there. She landed in a drift at the bottom, gasping, disoriented. Trees surrounded her, thick pines she didn't recognize. She'd gone off the road, way off. This was the woods on the east side of town, the part her father had told her never to enter. "Those woods are dangerous," he'd said more than once. "Old mine shafts, unstable ground, bad history. You stay clear, Emma. Promise me." She'd promised. But promises didn't matter when you were lost and freezing and alone. Emma pushed herself up, snow clinging to her coat, her face, her eyelashes. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore. Her teeth chattered so hard it hurt her jaw. She needed shelter, needed warmth, needed to get out of the wind before hypothermia set in. She staggered forward, using trees for support, barely able to see through the blizzard. And then, impossible and surreal, she stumbled and fell again. Her knee hit something hard beneath the snow. Not a rock. Too smooth. Too straight. She brushed away the powder with numb hands and froze. Metal. A metal rung. She cleared more snow, revealing another rung below it, and another. A ladder. Industrial, heavy-duty, bolted into something solid. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. A ladder? Out here? In the middle of nowhere? She dug faster now, adrenaline fighting the cold, and uncovered the top. The ladder descended into a circular shaft, maybe 4 feet wide, disappearing into darkness below. The metal was new, not rusted, maintained. And rising from the depths came something that made no sense. Warm air. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to melt the snow at the edges. Enough to make her frozen face tingle. She looked around, but the storm had swallowed everything. No lights, no voices, no help coming. She was alone, freezing, and this ladder, whatever it led to, offered the only shelter she might find. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Stay calm, think smart. Emma made a choice. She swung her leg over the edge, found the first rung with her boot, and started to climb down. The ladder was cold against her mittens, but stable, solid, 20 rungs down, the wind noise faded. 30 rungs, and the air grew warmer. 40 rungs, and Emma's boots touched concrete. She was in a tunnel. The walls were smooth, industrial, lit by dim emergency lights that flickered on as she moved, responding to her presence. Motion sensors. The tunnel stretched ahead, curving gently to the right, disappearing into shadow. Emma pulled off her mittens, feeling returning to her fingers in painful pins and needles. The air down here was dry, temperature-controlled, maybe 60 degrees. Warm compared to the frozen hell above. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. She walked slowly, cautiously, her wet boots squeaking on the clean floor. The tunnel was maybe 7 feet high, wide enough for 2 people to pass comfortably. Every 50 feet, another light blinked on ahead of her, creating a path through the darkness. The walls were marked with yellow stripes and stenciled numbers. Section A7, Section A8. This wasn't a mine, wasn't a cave. This was a facility. Built, maintained, active. Emma's fear shifted into something else. Curiosity mixed with dread. Where was she? What was this place? And why was it hidden beneath the woods outside Pine Ridge? The tunnel opened into a larger space, a junction where 3 corridors met. Emma stopped, overwhelmed. Signs pointed in different directions. Monitoring station, laboratory wing, residential quarters, control room. Each direction looked identical, sterile and empty. The hum of ventilation systems filled the silence, a low mechanical breathing that made the place feel alive. She chose the corridor marked monitoring station, moving quietly now, instinct telling her to stay hidden. The hallway led to a door partially open. Emma peeked through. Inside was a room filled with equipment, computer screens mounted on walls, filing cabinets, desks covered in papers and coffee cups. But what made her breath catch were the monitors. 20 of them, arranged in a grid, each showing a different view. And Emma recognized what they were showing. Pine Ridge, the town square, Main Street, the elementary school, the hardware store where her father worked, her own street, her own house. Every screen showed a different angle, different location, all live feeds. Someone was watching. Someone had been watching the entire town. Emma stepped inside, her hands trembling again, but not from cold, from fear, from the wrongness of this. She moved to the nearest desk and saw papers scattered across it. Reports, documents with official-looking headers. One caught her eye. Pine Ridge Water Quality Analysis, Month 47. She picked it up, scanning the page. Chemical compounds she didn't understand, numbers marked in red, a handwritten note in the margin. Contamination levels still rising. Subject pool showing increased symptoms. Recommend continued monitoring. Subject pool. Emma's stomach turned. They were talking about people, about the town. She grabbed another document. This one was a spreadsheet. Names listed in rows, dates in columns, notes in between. She recognized names. Mr. Peterson, who ran the grocery store. The Ramirez family from church. Mrs. Holloway, her teacher. And then, near the bottom, a name that made the world tilt. Sarah Chen. Status, deceased. Cause, acute exposure, level 4 incident. Emma's vision blurred. The paper slipped from her hands. Her mother was on this list. Not as a random name, but marked, tracked, deceased with a cause that wasn't a hiking accident, wasn't a fall, was exposure. Exposure to what? She spun around, looking at the monitors again, seeing them differently now. Not security cameras, surveillance. The town wasn't being protected, it was being studied, watched like lab rats in a maze. And her mother had died because of something they were doing, something they were testing. Emma's hands shook as she pulled out her mother's camera from her backpack. She didn't know what else to do, but she knew she needed evidence. She started photographing everything. The monitors, the documents, the lists of names, the chemical reports. Page after page, click after click, the old camera capturing what her 8-year-old mind could barely process. She was so focused she almost didn't hear it. Footsteps, distant but growing closer. Someone was coming. Emma's heart exploded into panic. She shoved the camera back into her backpack, looked frantically for a place to hide. The room had nowhere. No closets, no furniture big enough. She ducked behind a filing cabinet in the corner, making herself as small as possible, and held her breath. The footsteps grew louder. A woman's voice, talking on a phone, echoed down the hallway. "No, I'm telling you, the readings are spiking again. We need to adjust the ratios before we hit critical mass. I don't care what corporate says, they're not down here seeing the data." The voice entered the room. Emma could see her through the gap between the cabinet and the wall. A woman, maybe 40, wearing a white lab coat, dark hair pulled back, eyes tired and worried. She was looking at one of the monitors, shaking her head. "I'm looking at it right now," the woman continued into her phone. "Main residential area, groundwater feed. Contamination is at 63 parts per million. That's 12 points higher than last month." She paused, listening. "No, they don't know. How would they know? We control the testing. The county lab sends everything through us." Another pause. Her voice dropped, angry. "I didn't sign up for this to hurt people. I thought we were doing environmental research, not poisoning a town." Emma's lungs burned. She needed to breathe, but didn't dare. The woman was pacing now, agitated. 3 more cases this month. Respiratory. 2 children. How much longer do you expect me to just collect data while people die?" A longer pause. The woman's shoulders slumped. "Fine. Yes. I'll continue the reports. But I'm documenting everything. Everything. If this goes wrong, I'm not taking the fall alone." The woman hung up, stood there for a moment, staring at nothing, then walked out of the room. Her footsteps faded down the corridor. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Emma stayed frozen for another full minute before she dared to move. When she finally stood, her legs were jelly, her heart still racing. That woman, whoever she was, knew. Knew people were dying. Knew children were getting sick. Knew it was because of whatever was in the water, and she was part of it. Emma needed to get out, needed to tell someone, needed to find her father. But as she turned toward the door, the lights flickered. All of them. Once. Twice. Then, a sound Emma had never heard before, a loud mechanical clunk that echoed through the facility. And then, a voice, distorted through speakers embedded in the ceiling. "Security Protocol Alpha initiated. Facility lockdown in progress. All personnel report to primary stations. Unauthorized access detected in monitoring section. Security team dispatched." Emma ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just bolted from the room and sprinted back the way she came. The corridor lights flashed red now, bathing everything in crimson. Her boots pounded against concrete. Her backpack slammed against her spine. Behind her, somewhere in the maze of tunnels, she heard more footsteps. Multiple sets. Running. Chasing. She reached the junction and went left away from the ladder, deeper into the facility. Wrong choice, but made in panic. The new corridor sloped downward, leading to another door, this one sealed. A keypad glowed beside it. Emma slammed into the door, pulled at it, but it didn't budge. Locked. She spun around. The footsteps were getting closer. Voices shouted commands she couldn't make out. Then a hand grabbed her shoulder. Emma screamed, tried to pull away, but the grip held firm. She was spun around and found herself staring up at the woman from before, the one in the lab coat. Up close, Emma could see her name tag, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. "What are you doing down here?" the woman hissed, not angry but terrified. "How did you get in?" Emma couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Dr. Mitchell looked down the corridor, heard the approaching footsteps, and made a decision. She pulled a keycard from her pocket, swiped it through the reader. The door clicked open. She shoved Emma through and followed, slamming it behind them. They were in another room, smaller, some kind of storage area lined with shelves of equipment and supplies. Dr. Mitchell knelt in front of Emma, gripping her shoulders, eyes intense. "Listen to me very carefully. You should not be here. Do you understand? This place doesn't exist, and if they find you—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "We need to hide you." "I know what you're doing," Emma said, her voice small but steady. "I saw the monitors, the documents, the names, my mum's name." Dr. Mitchell's face went pale. "Your mum?" "Sarah Chen. She's on your list. Status deceased. Acute exposure." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed strong. "You said it was a hiking accident. Everyone said it was an accident, but it wasn't, was it?" The doctor's hands started shaking. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "What's your name?" "Emma Chen." Dr. Mitchell sat back hard, her face crumbling. "Oh God! Oh my God! Sarah's daughter." She looked at Emma like she was seeing a ghost. "Your mother, she wasn't supposed to be in those woods. We had them marked as restricted, but she was hiking, researching local ecology for the college. She found one of our monitoring wells, started asking questions. She took samples." The doctor's voice cracked. "She wasn't supposed to drink from that stream." Emma's world tilted. "You killed her?" "No, I mean, not intentionally. The chemicals, they're experimental mining compounds. Corporate said they were safe in low doses, but your mother was exposed to a concentrated leak. By the time we found her, tried to help her, it was too late." Dr. Mitchell grabbed Emma's hands. "I tried, I swear I tried. But they wouldn't let me call for help, wouldn't let me tell the truth. They staged the accident, the fall, made it look natural. I've been carrying that guilt every single day." The footsteps outside grew louder. Voices barked orders. "Search every room. Find whoever triggered the sensors." Dr. Mitchell stood quickly, pulled Emma toward a large storage cabinet. "Get in. Don't make a sound. I'll lead them away." "Why are you helping me?" Emma whispered. The doctor looked at her with eyes that held too much regret. "Because I couldn't save your mother. Maybe I can save you." She pushed Emma into the cabinet, closed the door, and Emma was swallowed by darkness. Through the thin metal, she heard Dr. Mitchell walk to the room's entrance, heard it open, heard her voice confident and annoyed. "What's going on? I was running quality checks." A man's voice, deep and authoritative. "We detected unauthorized entry. Have you seen anyone?" "In the storage bay? No. I've been alone for the last hour. We need to search. Be my guest. But make it quick. I have samples degrading in Lab 3. Emma held her breath as footsteps entered the room, moved around, opened doors, checked corners. She pressed herself against the back of the cabinet, behind boxes of supplies, making herself invisible. Time stretched into eternity. Finally, the footsteps retreated. "Clear. Moving to next sector." The door closed. Silence. Emma waited, counting heartbeats. 100. 200. Then the cabinet opened. Dr. Mitchell stood there, flashlight in hand, face grim. "They're gone for now, but they'll sweep the entire facility. We have maybe 20 minutes before they circle back." She pulled Emma out, handed her a bottle of water and a granola bar. "Eat, drink. You need energy." While Emma ate, Dr. Mitchell moved to a computer terminal in the corner, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm giving you access to the emergency exit, North Tunnel, Section C. It comes up 2 miles from here, hidden in an old ranger station. From there, you can make it to the main road." "Come with me," Emma said. "Tell people what they did, what you're doing here." Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "I can't. If I run, they'll bury everything, destroy the evidence. But you're a child, a victim. If you get out, if you tell your story, people will listen. They'll have to investigate." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket, pressed it into Emma's palm. "This has everything. All the data, all the files, every name, every chemical report, every cover-up. I've been backing it up for months, waiting for the right moment." She closed Emma's fingers around it. "You're that moment." "My dad," Emma said. "He'll be looking for me." "I know, and he'll find you. But first, you need to get out of here alive." Dr. Mitchell stood, pulled Emma to her feet. "Listen carefully. The North Tunnel exit. There's a phone in the ranger station. Old landline. Call your father. Tell him everything. Don't trust the local police. Some of them are on the company payroll. Go straight to the state investigators or the media. Can you do that? Emma nodded, gripping the USB drive like a lifeline. Dr. Mitchell led her back into the corridor, moving quickly but quietly. They passed through sections Emma hadn't seen before. Labs filled with equipment, sleeping quarters, a cafeteria frozen in time. The facility was massive, easily the size of several city blocks, all hidden beneath the earth. They reached a door marked North Emergency Exit. Dr. Mitchell swiped her card, and it opened to reveal a long tunnel, this one rougher, older, more like a mine shaft. Follow this straight for a quarter-mile. You'll see daylight at the end. The storm should have passed by now. Can you make it? Yes, Emma said, surprised by how certain she sounded. Dr. Mitchell knelt one last time, looked Emma in the eyes. I'm sorry, for your mother, for everything. But you're brave, braver than I've been. Make them hear you, Emma. Make them listen. Then she was gone, door closing behind her, leaving Emma alone in the tunnel with a USB drive full of secrets and the weight of truth pressing down on her small shoulders. Emma started walking. The tunnel sloped upward, rough-hewn rock on either side, a single string of lights guiding the way. Her legs ached. Her body felt hollowed out by fear and adrenaline. But she kept moving. Behind her, somewhere in the depths of the facility, alarms began to wail. They'd discovered she was gone. Footsteps echoed, distant but multiplying. They were coming. Emma ran. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching forever upward. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. But ahead, impossibly, beautifully, she saw it. Daylight, grey and cold, but real. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried in white. Emma burst from the tunnel entrance, concealed behind fallen timber at the old ranger station, just as Dr. Mitchell had said. She scrambled through snow up to her waist, fell, got up, kept going. The ranger station was 100 yards away, a small wooden building half collapsed, but still standing. She crashed through the door, and there, on the wall, was the phone. An old rotary covered in dust. Emma grabbed the receiver, dial tone. Her hands shook so badly she could barely turn the dial. 911. The numbers spun back into place with agonizing slowness. It rang once, twice. 911, what's your emergency? Emma's voice came out broken, raw. My name is Emma Chen. I'm 8 years old. I found something bad, and I need my dad. Above ground, while Emma spoke to the dispatcher, Marcus Chen was standing in his living room surrounded by half the town's volunteer search team. He'd been searching for 4 hours, ever since the school called to say Emma never made it home. His voice was hoarse from shouting her name. His hands were bloody from tearing through frozen branches, and his heart was a hollow drum, beating one word over and over. Not again, not again, not again. His phone rang, unknown number. He answered without thinking. Hello? Mr. Chen? A woman's voice, professional, careful. This is dispatch. We have your daughter. She's safe. Marcus's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the couch, phone pressed so tight to his ear it hurt. Emma? Where is she? She's at the old ranger station, North Woods. Sir, she's asking for you. And Mr. Chen? The dispatcher paused. She says she has evidence of something big. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his coat, his keys, shouting at the search team to follow. They piled into trucks and ATVs, headlights cutting through the darkness as they roared toward the North Woods. Marcus drove like a man possessed, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. When they reached the ranger station, Emma was sitting on the steps wrapped in a blanket an EMT had given her. The moment she saw her father's truck, she ran. Marcus jumped out, and they collided in the snow, Emma's small body crashing into him with enough force to knock the breath from his lungs. He held her so tight he was afraid he might break her, but he couldn't let go. Couldn't believe she was real, was here, was alive. Dad, Emma said into his chest, I found it. I found what Mom was looking for. Marcus pulled back just enough to see her face. What are you talking about? Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out the USB drive. They've been poisoning us. All of us. There's a facility underground, hidden in the woods. They're testing chemicals in our water and watching what happens. Mum found out. That's why she died. It wasn't an accident, Dad. They killed her. Marcus stared at his daughter, at the small black drive in her hand, at the certainty in her eyes. Around them, the search team had gone quiet, listening. Sheriff Dawkins stepped forward, hand extended. "Emma, sweetheart, why don't you give that to me? We'll sort this all out." But Marcus remembered Sarah coming home 3 days before she died, agitated, talking about strange equipment in the woods, about water that smelled wrong, about needing to do more tests. Remembered how the sheriff had dismissed her concerns, said she was stressed, overworked. Remembered how quickly they'd ruled the death an accident. He pulled Emma behind him, faced the sheriff. "No, we're going to the state police, right now. Marcus, be reasonable. My wife is dead. My daughter was almost killed. Reasonable ended 4 hours ago when I thought I'd lost her too." He picked Emma up, carried her to his truck, buckled her in. The search team parted as he drove through, most of them following, believing, ready to stand witness. They drove through the night, Emma curled against her father's side, the USB drive clutched in her hand, and the weight of truth finally beginning to shift. Behind them, deep in the earth beneath Pine Ridge, Dr. Sarah Mitchell sat at her desk and wrote one final email. She attached every file she had, every document, every piece of evidence, and she sent it to 20 different news organizations with one subject line: a town called Pine Ridge and the corporate conspiracy that buried it. Then she waited, for the footsteps, for the consequences, for whatever came next, because Emma Chen had made it out, and that changed everything. The state police barracks in Helena sat 2 hours west of Pine Ridge, a squat brick building that looked more like an accounting office than a place where justice happened. Marcus pulled into the parking lot just after midnight, Emma still pressed against his side, the USB drive wrapped in her small fist like a talisman. The building's lights burned bright against the darkness, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope mixed with rage, a combustible combination that made his hands shake as he lifted Emma from the truck. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white. A desk sergeant looked up, mid-40s with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his uniform. "Help you folks?" Marcus set Emma down but kept his hand on her shoulder. "My daughter found evidence of a crime, a big one. We need to speak to whoever handles corporate corruption and conspiracy." The sergeant's eyebrows rose. "It's past midnight, sir. Maybe you could come back in the morning." "No." Marcus's voice came out harder than he intended. "My wife died 2 years ago. They said it was an accident. Tonight my daughter nearly died uncovering the truth about what really happened. We're not waiting until morning. We're not giving them time to clean up or disappear evidence. We need someone now." Something in his voice, or maybe in Emma's face, pale and determined despite her exhaustion, made the sergeant pick up his phone. "Let me see what I can do." 20 minutes later, they sat in a conference room across from Detective Sarah Vance, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen enough lies to recognize truth when it walked through her door. She'd brought coffee for Marcus and hot chocolate for Emma, and she listened without interruption as Emma told her story. Emma spoke clearly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She described the blizzard, finding the ladder, climbing down into the facility. She described the monitoring room, the cameras watching every corner of Pine Ridge, the documents listing names and symptoms. She described Dr. Mitchell, the woman who'd helped her escape, who'd given her the USB drive now sitting on the table between them. "They've been poisoning the whole town," Emma said, her small hands wrapped around the hot chocolate mug. "Testing chemicals in the water to see what happens to people. My mum found out. That's why they killed her." Detective Vance had taken notes throughout, her pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. Now she set it down and looked at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, your wife's death was ruled accidental. You're saying you believe it was actually—" "Murder," Marcus finished. Sarah was a field biologist. She spent months researching local waterways for the community college. 3 days before she died, She came home talking about finding strange equipment in the woods, about water samples that didn't make sense. She said she was going back to collect more evidence. His voice cracked. I thought she was just being thorough. I didn't know she'd stumbled onto something that would get her killed. Detective Vance picked up the USB drive, turning it over in her fingers. You understand what you're alleging here? This kind of conspiracy would involve multiple people, significant resources, coordination between corporate and possibly government entities. It's not something we can investigate lightly. Then investigate heavily, Marcus said. Whatever it takes. Vance nodded slowly, then stood. Wait here. She left the room, taking the USB drive with her. Through the glass wall, they watched her disappear into another office. Minutes ticked by. Emma's head drooped against her father's shoulder, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. Marcus held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, still unable to fully believe she was safe. When Detective Vance returned 45 minutes later, her expression had changed. The professional skepticism was gone, replaced by something harder. Anger. She sat down heavily, slid a stack of printed documents across the table. We've only scratched the surface of what's on this drive, but what we've found so far is damning. Chemical analysis reports showing toxic compounds in groundwater samples. Health records for over 300 Pine Ridge residents documenting unexplained illnesses. Internal emails discussing acceptable casualty rates and subject pool maintenance. And surveillance footage of your town spanning back 15 years. Marcus stared at the papers, his vision blurring. 15 years? The facility was built in 2010 by a subsidiary of Helix Mining Corporation. According to these documents, they were testing a new extraction chemical called Compound R7, designed to make mineral extraction more efficient. But the compound was untested on human populations. So they picked a small, isolated town, introduced it into the groundwater through what they called controlled dispersal points, and monitored the results. They used us as guinea pigs, Marcus whispered. That's exactly what they did. Vance's jaw tightened. And when people started getting sick, when questions started being asked, they covered it up, paid off local officials, controlled the water testing, made problems disappear. She looked at Emma, something like awe in her eyes. Your daughter just handed us the biggest case this state has seen in decades. Marcus felt his chest tighten. What happens now? Now we move fast. I'm calling the Attorney General's office, the EPA, and the FBI. We'll need Emma to give a full statement on video. We'll need you to provide everything you have about your wife's death. And we'll need to secure that facility before Helix realizes we know about it. She paused. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. These people have money, lawyers, connections. They're going to come at you with everything they have. Your lives are about to get very complicated. Our lives got complicated the day they killed my wife, Marcus said quietly. We're ready. By sunrise, the state police barracks had transformed into a command center. FBI agents arrived in dark SUVs, their faces serious and efficient. EPA investigators rolled in with cases of testing equipment. The Attorney General herself, Margaret Reeves, a formidable woman with iron-gray hair and a reputation for taking down corporate criminals, set up in the largest conference room and started making calls. Emma gave her statement to a gentle interviewer named Agent Brooks, a woman with kind eyes who let Emma hold her stuffed rabbit from the truck while she talked. They recorded everything, every detail of the facility, every word Dr. Mitchell had said, every document Emma had seen. When Emma described finding her mother's name on the deceased list, Agent Brooks had to pause the recording because her own voice wavered. While Emma talked, Marcus sat in another room with Detective Vance and 2 FBI agents going through Sarah's belongings. He'd boxed them up after her death, unable to look at them, unable to throw them away. Now he unpacked everything. Her field notebooks, her camera, her water testing kit. In one notebook, dated 3 days before her death, Sarah had written, Found monitoring station, grid 7B. Water sample shows unknown compound, possibly industrial runoff. Taking additional samples tomorrow. Something's not right here. Grid 7B. It matched the facility maps on Emma's USB drive. Sarah had found them. And they'd found her. "We'll need to exhume her body," one of the FBI agents said quietly. "If she died from chemical exposure, there will be traces in her tissue. It could be the physical evidence we need." Marcus closed his eyes, the thought of Sarah's grave being disturbed making his stomach turn, but he nodded. Do it. She'd want the truth. By mid-morning, a tactical team assembled to raid the underground facility. They'd obtained emergency warrants, and Attorney General Reeves had personally called the governor to ensure no one could interfere. 50 agents in body armor, hazmat teams in containment suits, and forensic specialists with cameras and evidence bags loaded into a convoy of vehicles. Marcus asked to go with them. Vance said no. "You're a witness now, Mr. Chen. You need to stay clean, stay separate from the investigation. Besides, your daughter needs you here." So Marcus stayed, watching through windows as the convoy rolled out, carrying with it the promise of justice 2 years overdue. He found Emma in the break room, curled up on a couch under a borrowed blanket, finally asleep. He sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her back, feeling her breathe. A television mounted in the corner showed the morning news. The anchor was mid-story about local weather when the broadcast cut to breaking news. Marcus's attention snapped to the screen. A reporter stood in front of a wooded area, police lights flashing behind her. "We're coming to you live from just outside Pine Ridge, Montana, where state and federal authorities are conducting what sources describe as a major raid on a previously unknown underground facility. Details are still emerging, but we're told this operation involves multiple agencies, including the FBI and EPA. Residents report seeing dozens of law enforcement vehicles heading into the North Woods area early this morning." The camera panned to show the convoy, agents emerging from vehicles, establishing a perimeter. Marcus watched, his heart pounding, as they approached the area where Emma had found the ladder. The reporter continued. "We've received unconfirmed reports that this raid is connected to allegations of environmental crimes and illegal human experimentation. Again, these reports are unconfirmed, but sources tell us a whistleblower provided evidence that led to this operation." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Vance. "News is out. Expect media attention. Don't talk to anyone without Attorney General approval." Within an hour, Marcus's phone was ringing constantly. Numbers he didn't recognize, reporters trying to get the story, neighbors from Pine Ridge asking if it was true, if the news about the facility was real. He turned the phone off, focused on Emma, on keeping her calm and safe while the world exploded around them. Emma woke just before noon, disoriented and groggy. Marcus got her food from the cafeteria, bland sandwiches and chips, but she ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. "Did they find it?" she asked. "The facility?" "They're there now," Marcus said. "They found it." On the television, the coverage continued. The reporter had been joined by others, cameras and satellite trucks setting up a media camp. An FBI spokesperson gave a brief statement. "We can confirm that federal and state authorities are executing search warrants at a location outside Pine Ridge, Montana. The investigation is ongoing, and we will provide updates as appropriate. We ask the public to avoid the area and allow law enforcement to do their work." What the spokesperson didn't say, but what was spreading through social media like wildfire, was that Helix Mining Corporation's stock had dropped 18% in the last hour, that their CEO had cancelled a scheduled press conference, that lawyers were already filing emergency motions to block the investigation. The fight had begun. By evening, the first team returned from the facility. Detective Vance came straight to Marcus and Emma, her face grim but satisfied. "We found it. Everything. The monitoring stations, the laboratories, the surveillance room. We found drums of compound R7, thousands of pages of documents, and computers with data going back 15 years. We found evidence of bribes paid to local officials, emails coordinating the cover-up, and reports detailing every single person in Pine Ridge who got sick." "Did you find Dr. Mitchell?" Emma asked, her voice small. Vance's expression softened. "We did. She's in custody, cooperating fully. She's the one who gave us the codes to access their secured files." She says she's been waiting for this day for 3 years, since she realized what Helix was really doing. Emma nodded, relief washing over her face. She saved me. She could have turned me in, but she saved me. We know, Vance said. And that's going to matter when charges are filed. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Dr. Mitchell was part of this for a long time. She helped run those tests. She watched people get sick and didn't stop it. Yes, she helped you in the end, and yes, she's cooperating now. But she's not innocent. Nobody down there is innocent, Emma said quietly, with a wisdom that shouldn't belong to an 8-year-old. But some people are less bad than others. What happens next will shake Pine Ridge to its core, expose powerful people who thought they were untouchable, and prove that even the smallest voice can shatter the biggest lies. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The town of Pine Ridge learned the truth the way most truths spread in small towns: fast, chaotic, and incomplete. By the time Marcus and Emma returned home 3 days later, escorted by state troopers for their protection, the entire community was in upheaval. Some people believed immediately, their own unexplained illnesses or lost loved ones suddenly making terrible sense. Others denied vehemently, unable or unwilling to accept that their home had been a testing ground, that their government had failed them, that people they trusted had lied. Marcus pulled his truck into their driveway to find their porch covered in flowers, cards, and signs. Some supportive, "Thank you, Emma, you're a hero." Others angry, "Liar, you're destroying our town." Marcus gathered them all up, sorted through them with Emma at the kitchen table. For every message of gratitude, there was one of blame. It hurt more than he expected. The hardware store where Marcus worked called that afternoon. The owner, Jim Davidson, a man Marcus had known for 12 years, was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I believe you, I do. But Helix Mining supplies our industrial equipment. They've made it clear that stores who employ you will lose their contracts. I can't afford that. I've got 3 other employees depending on me." Marcus hung up, stared at the phone. He'd just lost his primary income. Emma watched from the doorway, her face guilty. "It's because of me." "No." Marcus knelt in front of her, took her hands. "It's because of them. Because people who did wrong are trying to punish us for exposing them. But we did the right thing, Emma. Even when the right thing is hard." Over the next week, the investigation expanded rapidly. The FBI arrested 17 people connected to Helix Mining Corporation, including 3 executives, 2 regional managers, and 12 scientists who'd worked in the facility. They arrested Sheriff Dawkins and 2 county commissioners who'd accepted bribes to falsify water quality reports. They froze Helix's assets and filed federal charges that carried potential sentences of 20 to 40 years. Dr. Sarah Mitchell turned state's witness. In exchange for her cooperation, prosecutors offered her a reduced sentence. She provided testimony that detailed every aspect of the operation. How they'd selected Pine Ridge because of its isolation and declining population, how they'd built the facility in secret using shell companies, how they'd systematically introduced compound R7 into 7 different groundwater entry points, and how they'd tracked the health impacts on 318 residents over 15 years. 47 people had died during those 15 years. Cancers, respiratory failures, organ damage, all attributed to natural causes or environmental factors. But Mitchell's testimony revealed the truth. They'd all been exposed to lethal levels of R7. Sarah Chen was number 41 on that list. The exhumation of Sarah's body confirmed it. Tissue analysis showed concentrations of R7 12 times higher than any other victim. She'd drunk directly from the contaminated stream, not knowing it was poison. She died within 18 hours, her organs shutting down one by one. The medical examiner who'd ruled it an accident had been on Helix's payroll, paid $15,000 to file a false report. When Marcus learned this, sitting in Detective Vance's office reading the autopsy findings, something inside him broke open. Not with grief this time, but with fury. They'd murdered his wife, poisoned her, and then paid someone to lie about it. They'd made him doubt himself, made him think he'd somehow failed to protect her when really there had been nothing he could do. They'd stolen 2 years of his life to guilt and confusion. He called Attorney General Reeves that night. "I want to testify. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I want to stand in front of a jury and tell them what these people took from us." "You'll get your chance," Reeves promised. "We're building the strongest case possible. Federal charges for conspiracy, reckless endangerment, negligent homicide, environmental crimes, and corruption. Some of these people will never see the outside of a prison again." But building that case meant reliving trauma. Marcus had to give depositions describing the last days of Sarah's life. Emma had to sit through multiple interviews, telling and retelling her story to investigators, prosecutors, and eventually a grand jury. Therapists warned that this was taking a toll on her, that an 8-year-old shouldn't have to carry this burden. But Emma insisted on continuing. "People need to know," she said simply. "Mom would want them to know." The media descended on Pine Ridge like locusts. National news crews, investigative reporters, documentary filmmakers, all wanting the story of the little girl who'd uncovered a conspiracy. Marcus shielded Emma from most of it, but some interviews he allowed, carefully controlled, always with him present. He wanted people to see her, to understand that real children had been hurt, real families destroyed. One interview aired on a national news program. The anchor, a sympathetic woman named Rachel Martinez, asked Emma how she felt about being called a hero. Emma thought for a moment, then said, "I'm not a hero. I was just cold and scared and trying not to die. The heroes are the people like Dr. Mitchell who finally decided to do the right thing even though it was scary, and my mum who saw something wrong and tried to stop it even though it got her killed." The clip went viral. Within days, Emma's story had been shared millions of times. Advocacy groups took up the cause. Environmental organizations demanded federal oversight of all mining operations. Parent groups called for stricter regulations on chemical testing. The pressure mounted not just on Helix Mining Corporation, but on the entire industry. Helix fought back hard. Their legal team, 50 lawyers strong, filed motion after motion trying to suppress evidence, dismiss charges, delay trials. They hired crisis management firms to discredit the investigation, spreading rumors that the facility had been purely for environmental research, that the chemicals found were naturally occurring, that Marcus and Emma were pursuing a frivolous lawsuit for money. Some people in Pine Ridge believed those rumors. The town split down the middle, those who'd been directly affected by the poisoning on one side, and those who feared economic collapse if Helix was destroyed on the other. Families stopped speaking to each other. The church congregation fractured. The high school had fights between students whose parents stood on opposite sides. Marcus and Emma found themselves isolated. Old friends crossed the street to avoid them. Parents told their children to stay away from Emma. Someone spray-painted "liar" across their garage door. Marcus scrubbed it off at 3 in the morning, not wanting Emma to see, but she'd already seen it from her bedroom window. "Why do they hate us?" Emma asked one night, curled up on the couch beside her father. "We didn't do anything wrong." "They're scared," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. "Change is frightening, especially when it means admitting you've been hurt by people you trusted. It's easier to be angry at us than to be angry at Helix because Helix is big and far away and we're right here." "That's stupid," Emma said. Marcus smiled despite everything. "Yeah, baby, it really is." But not everyone turned against them. Some people stood firm. Marcus's old search and rescue team showed up one Saturday to repair the spray-painted garage and install security cameras. A group of mothers whose children had been sick organized a support network, bringing meals and offering childcare. The community college where Sarah had worked established a scholarship in her name for students studying environmental science. And slowly, very slowly, the truth became undeniable. The EPA released preliminary findings. Compound R7 detected in 92% of Pine Ridge water samples at levels far exceeding safety standards. The CDC opened an investigation into the health cluster, confirming elevated rates of cancer, respiratory disease, and developmental issues in Pine Ridge children. Independent labs verified the evidence on Emma's USB drive, confirming it hadn't been fabricated or tampered with. 6 weeks after Emma climbed out of that underground facility, the first trial began. Not the big one, not the executives or the conspiracy charges, but the trial of Sheriff Dawkins and the 2 county commissioners for corruption and obstruction of justice. It was meant to be a warm-up, a way to test evidence and witnesses before the main event. Marcus and Emma attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching as prosecutors laid out the case. Bank records showing payments from Helix shell companies, emails coordinating falsified water reports, testimony from Dr. Mitchell describing how local officials had been bought and paid for. Sheriff Dawkins took the stand in his own defense. He was defiant, claiming he'd only accepted consulting fees for legitimate work, that he'd had no idea Helix was doing anything illegal. But when prosecutors showed him an email he'd written saying, "We need to keep the Chen woman quiet before she causes real problems," his defense crumbled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Dawkins was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The commissioners got 8 years each. It was the first victory, small but significant. That night, Marcus made Emma's favorite dinner, spaghetti with too much garlic bread. They ate in the kitchen, the news playing softly in the background, reporting on the verdict. Emma pushed her pasta around her plate, quiet. "You okay?" Marcus asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then shrugged. "I keep thinking about all the people who are still sick. The guilty verdicts don't make them better." Marcus set down his fork, reached across the table to take her hand. "No, they don't. But they mean something. They mean there are consequences for hurting people. They mean that what you did, what you found, mattered. Those people are going to get care now, compensation, support they wouldn't have gotten if you'd stayed quiet." "I didn't stay quiet because I was brave," Emma said softly. "I stayed loud because I was angry." "Sometimes anger is exactly what brave looks like," Marcus told her. "Your mother was angry too, angry about injustice, about people being hurt. That anger made her investigate, made her take risks, and now it's making sure her death meant something." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I miss her." "I know, baby. So do I." They sat together in the kitchen, holding hands across the table, grieving and healing in the complicated way that comes from choosing truth over silence. Outside, Pine Ridge continued its transformation. Some wounds closing, others opening. Some people finding forgiveness, others hardening into bitterness. But change had come, carried on the small shoulders of a girl who'd been brave enough to climb down into darkness and strong enough to bring light back up. In her cell at the Federal Detention Center, Dr. Sarah Mitchell wrote letters to every family who'd lost someone to R7 exposure, to every parent whose child had gotten sick, to Emma Chen, though she didn't know if Emma would ever read it. In the letter to Emma, she wrote, "You saved more than yourself when you climbed out of that facility. You saved my soul. I'd been living in cowardice for so long I'd forgotten what courage looked like. Thank you for showing me. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, but I know it will never be enough. What you did, what you risked, it matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Marcus found the letter among the stack of mail that still arrived daily, and he read it to Emma one evening. She listened quietly, then asked, "Can we write her back?" "Do you want to?" Emma thought about it, remembering the woman who'd pushed her into a cabinet to hide her, who'd given her the evidence that started everything, who'd made a choice in the darkness that led to light. "Yeah," Emma said finally. "I think I do." So they sat together and wrote a response. Emma's handwriting was careful, each letter formed with concentration. "Dear Dr. Mitchell, thank you for helping me. I was really scared, and you made me feel less alone. I don't know if what you did before was good or bad. Dad says people are complicated, but I know what you did that night was good. I hope you get to help people again someday. From Emma." They mailed it the next morning, and Marcus didn't know if it would make a difference, if forgiveness could be found in such simple words. But he hoped, because hope, like anger, like courage, was a choice they made every single day in the wreckage of what had been and the uncertain promise of what might be. The executives at Helix Mining Corporation's headquarters in Denver held an emergency board meeting the day after Sheriff Dawkins was convicted. In a glass tower overlooking the city, 18 men and women in expensive suits gathered around a mahogany table, their faces tight with controlled panic. The company's stock had plummeted 43%. 3 major investors had pulled out. 18 ongoing mining contracts had been suspended pending investigation. And worst of all, the federal government was now treating Pine Ridge as a potential Superfund site, which meant unlimited liability and decades of cleanup costs. Raymond Foster sat at the far end of the table, silent while others argued. He was 56 years old, former military intelligence, and for the last 12 years he'd served as Helix's Director of Security and Risk Management, which meant he was the man responsible for making problems disappear. He'd done it successfully for over a decade, quietly settling lawsuits, managing witnesses, ensuring that nothing threatened the company's bottom line. But Emma Chen had been a problem he hadn't anticipated, a child who'd literally stumbled into their most guarded secret and somehow survived to tell about it. The CEO, Marcus Trent, a silver-haired man who'd built his fortune on aggressive expansion and minimal oversight, slammed his hand on the table. Someone explained to me how an 8-year-old girl brought down an operation we've run successfully for 15 years. Someone explained how she found a facility that cost us $80 million to build and hide. Bad luck, one executive offered weakly. The storm, the ladder access point being exposed, the timing. I don't pay you for bad luck, Trent interrupted. I pay you for solutions. Foster, you've been quiet. What's your assessment? Foster leaned forward, his voice calm and measured. Our exposure is complete. The FBI has the facility, the documents, the testimony from Mitchell. The physical evidence is irrefutable. We can't make this go away through legal maneuvering or settlements. The only question now is how much damage we limit and who takes the fall. You're suggesting we throw people to the wolves? Another executive asked, horrified. I'm suggesting we prioritize survival, Foster replied. The company can survive if we compartmentalize properly. We claim the operation was conducted by a rogue division acting without board knowledge. We provide cooperation to investigators, sacrifice the middle management, protect the executives and the corporation itself. Trent nodded slowly. The facility managers, the on-site scientists, the security personnel, they all operated independently, pursued an unauthorized research agenda without proper oversight. Exactly, Foster said. We express shock and outrage. We offer compensation to Pine Ridge victims. We commit to transparency and reform. And we survive. What about the girl? Someone asked. The Chen girl. She's become a symbol. As long as she's out there telling her story, we look like monsters. Foster's expression didn't change. Leave her alone. Anything that happens to her now makes us look guilty. We're already fighting a PR nightmare. If that child suffers so much as a suspicious accident, we're finished. No, we let her have her moment. Child heroes are forgotten quickly. The news cycle moves on. In 6 months, no one will remember her name. But Foster was wrong. 6 months later, Emma Chen's name was more famous than ever. The main trial began in April, 5 months after Emma had climbed down that ladder. Federal prosecutors brought charges against 11 Helix executives and 17 facility personnel. The charges included conspiracy to commit negligent homicide, reckless endangerment, environmental crimes, fraud, and corruption. If convicted on all counts, the defendants faced potential sentences of 30 to 50 years in federal prison. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the evidence from Emma's USB drive, authenticated by 3 independent forensic analysts. They showed the jury surveillance footage of Pine Ridge, explained the monitoring systems, and detailed exactly how compound R7 had been introduced into the groundwater. They brought in toxicologists who explained the chemical's effects on human tissue, how it accumulated in organs, how it caused the cancers and respiratory failures that had killed 47 people. And they brought in victims. 32 residents of Pine Ridge testified about their illnesses, their lost loved ones, their shattered lives. A mother described watching her 6-year-old son struggle to breathe, his lungs scarred by chemical exposure. A husband talked about his wife's brain tumor, how she'd forgotten his name in the end, how the medical examiner had found R7 concentrations in her cerebral tissue 20 times higher than safety limits. Marcus testified on the 14th day of the trial. He wore his only suit, bought second-hand for Sarah's funeral, and worn only twice since. He sat in the witness box and told the jury about his wife, about how she'd been brilliant and curious and determined to make the world better, about how she'd gone into the woods to collect water samples and never came home, about how he'd believed for 2 years that her death was his fault somehow, that he should have protected her, should have known something was wrong. "But I couldn't have known," Marcus said, his voice breaking, "because they lied. They paid the medical examiner to lie. They paid the sheriff to cover it up. They poisoned my wife, and then they made sure no one would ever know the truth." He looked directly at the defendants, 12 people in expensive suits sitting stone-faced at the defense table. "You took everything from me, from my daughter, and you did it for money, for quarterly earnings reports, for stock prices." The defense attorneys tried to discredit him on cross-examination, suggested he was motivated by a pending civil lawsuit, implied his grief had clouded his judgment. But Marcus didn't break. He answered every question calmly, supported by the mountain of evidence that proved every word he said. Emma testified on day 17. The prosecutors had debated whether to call her, worried about putting a 9-year-old on the stand. But Emma had insisted, and her therapist agreed she was ready. They set up special accommodations, a smaller chair, frequent breaks, and a comfort dog named Bailey, who sat at her feet throughout her testimony. The courtroom was packed when Emma took the stand. Every seat filled with reporters, victims' families, and observers who'd traveled from across the country to witness this moment. Emma wore a blue dress her father had bought special for the occasion, her dark hair braided neatly. She looked tiny in the witness box, her feet barely touching the floor, but when she began to speak, her voice carried. She told the jury everything: the blizzard, the fear, finding the ladder, climbing down into the facility, seeing the monitoring room, reading the documents with her mother's name. She described Dr. Mitchell helping her escape, giving her the evidence. She described running through the tunnels, climbing out into the snow, calling for her father. "Were you scared?" the prosecutor asked gently. "Yes," Emma said. "I thought I was going to die like my mom did, but then I got angry instead." "Angry about what?" "About them watching us, poisoning us, pretending everything was okay when they knew people were dying." Emma's hands clenched into small fists. "My mum died trying to stop them. I wasn't going to let her die for nothing." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge, a stern woman named Patricia Hendricks who'd presided over hundreds of criminal trials, had to pause proceedings to compose herself. The jury looked at Emma with expressions ranging from heartbreak to fury, and when they glanced at the defendants, those expressions hardened into something unmovable. The defense tried to be gentle in cross-examination, aware that attacking a 9-year-old girl would destroy any remaining sympathy. They suggested Emma might have misunderstood what she saw, that the facility could have had legitimate purposes she didn't understand, that her young age made her memories unreliable. Emma listened patiently to each question, then responded with clarity that belied her age. "I know what I saw. I took pictures with my mom's camera. I read the documents. They said my mom was deceased and acute exposure and level 4 incident. I might be 9, but I know what those words mean. They mean you killed her." The defense attorney had no response to that. He sat down, defeated, and Emma was excused. As she stepped down from the witness box, she walked past the defendant's table. Most of them looked away, unable to meet her eyes. But one man, Raymond Foster, stared directly at her with an expression Emma couldn't read. Not anger, not guilt. Something else. Something calculated. Marcus saw that look and felt ice run down his spine. He put his arm around Emma and led her quickly from the courtroom, suddenly convinced that despite everything, despite the trials and the evidence and the media attention, they weren't safe yet. He was right to worry. 2 weeks later, while the trial was still ongoing, Marcus came home from the grocery store to find his front door slightly ajar. He'd locked it when he left, he was certain. He told Emma to stay in the truck, called 911, and waited for police to clear the house. They found nothing stolen, no signs of forced entry. But in Emma's room, someone had left a message. A single sentence written in red marker across her mirror: "Accidents happen to everyone." The police took it seriously, dusted for prints, found nothing. They increased patrols around the house, but Marcus knew patrols couldn't stop someone determined enough. He installed new locks, a security system, cameras on every approach. He taught Emma to check in every hour when she was at school, to never go anywhere alone, to trust her instincts if something felt wrong. "Are they going to hurt us?" Emma asked one night, staring at the covered mirror in her room. "I won't let them," Marcus promised, though he didn't know if it was a promise he could keep. These were people who'd poisoned an entire town and covered it up for 15 years. People who'd murdered his wife and made it look like an accident. People who had billions of dollars and decades of experience making problems disappear. He called Detective Vance, who brought in FBI protective services. They assigned 2 agents to watch the house in rotating shifts. It should have made Marcus feel safer. Instead, it made him realize how real the danger was. The trial continued through May. The defense presented their case, arguing that the facility had been conducting legitimate environmental research, that the deaths in Pine Ridge were coincidental or caused by other factors, that compound R7 was within safety parameters. They brought in their own experts who contradicted the prosecution's toxicologists, who suggested the chemical concentrations had been misread, who claimed there was no proven causal link between R7 and the illnesses. But the evidence was too strong. The internal emails were too damning. One email, written by a Helix vice president named Thomas Carrington, read, "Subject pool showing higher than anticipated mortality rates. Recommend reducing R7 dispersal by 15% to extend study timeline. We need at least 8 more years of data before compound viability can be determined." Subject pool, study timeline. They'd referred to human beings, to families, to children as data points in a research project. The jury heard that email, and any remaining doubt evaporated. On June 3rd, after deliberating for 6 days, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on 97 of 103 counts. The courtroom erupted. Victims' families wept and embraced. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. The defendants sat in stunned silence as the judge read each guilty verdict, one after another, a litany of accountability that had been decades in coming. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge showed no mercy. The facility director received 42 years. The lead scientist got 38. The executives who'd authorized the project received sentences ranging from 25 to 35 years. In total, the 11 defendants were sentenced to a combined 314 years in federal prison. Marcus Trent, the CEO, was sentenced to 32 years. As marshals led him from the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked at Emma one last time. Not with hatred or remorse, but with something like disbelief. As if he couldn't comprehend how a child had destroyed everything he'd built. Raymond Foster received 28 years. He didn't look at Emma at all, just stared straight ahead as they led him away, his face expressionless, already calculating angles Marcus couldn't see. Outside the courthouse, Attorney General Reeves held a press conference. Marcus and Emma stood beside her, along with dozens of Pine Ridge victims. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Reeves raised her hand for silence. Today, justice was served. But let's be clear about what justice means in this case. Justice doesn't bring back the 47 people who died. It doesn't cure the hundreds who are still sick. It doesn't erase 15 years of suffering and lies. What it does is send an unequivocal message. No corporation, no matter how powerful, no matter how wealthy, is above the law. And no crime, no matter how well hidden, can survive the light of truth. She turned to Emma. This young woman at 8 years old showed more courage than many adults ever will. She climbed into the unknown, documented evidence of massive crimes, and refused to stay silent even when powerful people tried to intimidate her. Because of Emma Chen, 47 murders were solved. Because of her, hundreds of victims received justice. Because of her, no other town will become a testing ground for corporate greed. The reporters turned their attention to Marcus and Emma. Questions flew. How does it feel to finally have justice? What will you do now? Emma, what do you want to say to other kids facing scary situations? Emma stepped forward to the microphone, and the crowd quieted. I want to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. I was scared the whole time. But my mum taught me that fear makes you stupid and calm makes you smart. So even when I was scared, I tried to stay calm and do the right thing. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Mitchell because she helped me when she didn't have to, and that matters. A reporter called out, "Do you forgive the people who killed your mother?" Emma thought about it, really thought, her face serious. I don't know yet, maybe someday, but right now I'm just glad they can't hurt anyone else. That clip played on every news station that night. Emma Chen, 9 years old, speaking about forgiveness and justice with a wisdom that moved millions. The story went global. International news agencies picked it up. Emma received letters from children around the world, from activists, from survivors of other corporate crimes. She received death threats too, anonymous messages promising retribution, but those were investigated and ultimately traced to conspiracy theorists with no real connections to Helix. The civil lawsuits came next. 318 victims filed a class action suit against Helix Mining Corporation seeking compensation for medical expenses, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. The company, facing bankruptcy from legal fees and collapsed stock value, settled for $2.7 billion. Each victim received $8.5 million on average, with larger amounts going to families who'd lost loved ones. Marcus received $12 million for Sarah's death. The number felt obscene, as if his wife's life could be measured in dollars. But he put most of it into a trust for Emma's future, and a foundation in Sarah's name dedicated to environmental protection and corporate accountability. The Sarah Chen Foundation would fund whistleblowers, support investigative journalism, and provide legal assistance to communities facing environmental crimes. Pine Ridge began to heal, slowly and imperfectly. The EPA installed new water systems, drilled new wells tested daily for contamination. A health clinic opened offering free care to anyone who'd been exposed to R7. Helix Mining Corporation was dissolved, its assets sold off to pay victims and fund the cleanup. The underground facility was sealed and designated as evidence, preserved for future researchers studying corporate crime. But healing wasn't universal. The town remained divided. Some families moved away, unable to live in a place that held so much trauma. Others stayed, determined to rebuild. The economy struggled without Helix's contracts, forcing businesses to close, leaving people unemployed. Some blamed Emma and Marcus for destroying the town's livelihood, conveniently forgetting that the livelihood had been built on poison. Marcus found work as a consultant for the Sarah Chen Foundation, investigating other potential cases of corporate environmental crime. Emma went back to school, but it was different now. Some kids treated her like a celebrity, others avoided her entirely. She'd become something larger than herself, a symbol that made people uncomfortable. She missed being just Emma, the quiet girl who drew pictures, and missed her mum. On the 1-year anniversary of finding the ladder, Marcus and Emma drove out to the sealed facility entrance. A memorial had been erected there, a simple stone monument listing the 47 names of those who'd died. Sarah Chen's name was near the top. They laid flowers at the base, white roses that Sarah had loved. "Do you think she's proud of us?" Emma asked, tracing her mother's name carved in granite. "I know she is," Marcus said. "You finished what she started. You made sure her death meant something." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "I still miss her every day." "Me too, baby. Me too." They stood together in the cold Montana wind. father and daughter bound by loss and love, and the strange journey that had transformed their grief into something larger than themselves. Emma had grown in the last year, physically taller, but also changed in ways harder to measure. She'd seen the worst of humanity and somehow maintained hope for the best. She'd faced powerful enemies and refused to blink. She'd carried a burden no child should carry, and done it with grace. Marcus looked at his daughter and saw Sarah in her, the same determination, the same refusal to accept injustice. And he made a silent promise to his late wife. "I'll protect her. I'll help her grow. I'll make sure she knows how extraordinary she is." As they drove home, Emma pulled out her mother's old camera from her backpack. She'd never stopped carrying it, a talisman connecting her to Sarah. She looked through the viewfinder at the landscape passing by, the mountains and trees and sky. "Dad, can we go hiking this weekend, like Mom used to take me?" Marcus glanced at her, surprised. Since Sarah's death, Emma had refused to go into the woods, the trauma too fresh. "You sure you're ready?" "Yeah," Emma said, still looking through the camera. "I think it's time. Mom loved these mountains. I don't want to be scared of them anymore." So that weekend, they hiked together for the first time in 3 years. They followed one of Sarah's favorite trails, stopping at the viewpoints she'd loved, collecting interesting rocks like she'd taught Emma to do. And slowly, step by step, they began to reclaim the wilderness that had been stolen from them by fear and loss. Emma photographed everything, her mother's camera clicking steadily, preserving moments of healing in digital form. A bird in flight, sunlight through pine trees, her father's profile against the mountain vista, each image a small act of defiance against the darkness that had tried to consume them. They weren't finished healing, probably never would be completely. But they were moving forward, carrying Sarah's memory and Emma's courage into whatever came next. Because that's what survival looked like, not forgetting, not pretending it never happened, but choosing to build something meaningful from the wreckage. And in a federal prison in Colorado, Raymond Foster sat in his cell and watched news coverage of Emma Chen hiking with her father. He'd been wrong about her. She wasn't a problem that would fade with time. She'd become something permanent, a reminder that even the most careful conspiracies could be unraveled by the most unexpected people. He'd spent his career making problems disappear, but Emma Chen had made his entire world disappear instead. 28 years he had left. 28 years to think about the child who'd beaten him. Somehow, he suspected, it wouldn't be enough time. The years that followed the trial transformed Pine Ridge in ways both visible and invisible. The town's population dropped to 1,800 by 2027, but those who remained were bound by something stronger than geography. They'd survived together, suffered together, and now they were healing together. The scars ran deep, but they ran in parallel, connecting people who might otherwise have remained strangers. Emma turned 13 in March of 2030, 5 years after she'd climbed down that ladder. She was taller now, her face losing its childhood roundness, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made adults pause and listen. She attended Pine Ridge Middle School, where she'd become president of the environmental club and captain of the debate team. Her teachers said she was brilliant, driven, and sometimes too serious for her age. But they also said she was kind, that she noticed when other kids were struggling, that she used her voice to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. The fame that had followed her story had mostly faded, as Raymond Foster had predicted. The news cycle had moved on to other tragedies, other heroes. But Emma's impact hadn't faded. The Sarah Chen Foundation, run by Marcus with a small staff of dedicated environmental lawyers and researchers, had helped expose 3 more corporate environmental crimes in the past 5 years. They'd assisted communities in Ohio, Texas, and Alaska in discovering illegal dumping, falsified safety reports, and systematic poisoning similar to what had happened in Pine Ridge. Each case started the same way: suspicious illnesses, unexplained deaths, corporations with something to hide. And each case ended with justice, not because the foundation had unlimited resources or political power, but because they'd learned from Emma's experience. They knew how to find evidence, how to protect whistleblowers, how to build cases that couldn't be dismissed or buried. They'd become experts in shining light into dark places. Emma worked with the foundation every summer, not in the field but in the office, cataloguing evidence, organizing files, and sometimes speaking to other young people who'd discovered environmental crimes in their communities. She told them what she'd learned, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, that documentation mattered more than accusations, that persistence could outlast even the most powerful opposition. One afternoon in late June, Emma sat in the Foundation's office, a converted house on Maple Street just 3 blocks from her home, reviewing files for a case in Pennsylvania. A 17-year-old girl named Rachel Morrison had discovered that a chemical plant was dumping waste into the creek behind her school. Rachel had collected samples, photographed the discharge pipes, and documented years of health problems in her neighborhood. But she was terrified of coming forward, afraid of retaliation, of being dismissed because of her age. Emma picked up the phone and called her. "Rachel, this is Emma Chen from the Sarah Chen Foundation." "Oh my God." Rachel's voice was breathless, starstruck. "I can't believe you're calling me." "I heard about what you found," Emma said. "About the creek and the discharge pipes. That took guts." "I'm scared," Rachel admitted. "What if I'm wrong? What if I make everything worse?" Emma remembered that fear, remembered standing in the monitoring room staring at her mother's name on a death list, remembered thinking she was too small, too young, too powerless to matter. "Here's what I learned," Emma said carefully. "You're not wrong. You know what you saw. And making it public doesn't make things worse. It makes the truth visible. The bad stuff is already happening whether people know about it or not. But once they know, once there's proof, change becomes possible." "What if they come after me?" "They might," Emma said honestly. "People don't like being exposed. But you won't be alone. We'll connect you with lawyers, investigators, media contacts. We'll help you stay safe. And Rachel, I was 8 when I found the facility under Pine Ridge. You're 17. You're smarter, stronger, and more capable than you think." There was silence on the line, then a shaky breath. Okay, I'll do it. Will you help me?" "Every step of the way," Emma promised. Over the next 3 months, Emma worked closely with Rachel, guiding her through the process of building a case, connecting with authorities, and eventually going public. The Pennsylvania case broke in September, making national news. Rachel Morrison became another young whistleblower, another voice proving that age didn't determine impact. And when reporters asked Rachel how she'd found the courage to come forward, she said the same thing every time. "Emma Chen showed me it was possible." Marcus watched his daughter grow into this role with a mixture of pride and concern. She was extraordinary, yes, but she was also carrying responsibilities that should belong to adults. She spent her weekends reviewing toxic waste reports instead of going to movies with friends. She had nightmares sometimes, waking up gasping about underground tunnels and red-lit corridors. The trauma of what she'd experienced at 8 years old hadn't vanished just because justice had been served. "You don't have to save everyone," Marcus told her one evening as they ate dinner together, just the two of them at the kitchen table like always. Emma looked up from her pasta, confused. "I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm just helping people who are in the same situation I was." "I know, and it's incredible, but baby, you're 13. You should be thinking about school dances and soccer tryouts, not corporate liability law." "I do think about school stuff," Emma said defensively. "I went to the fall festival last month." "For an hour. Then you came home to work on case files." Emma set down her fork. "Dad, do you want me to stop? Because I can't. Every time I think about stepping back, I remember Mum. I remember finding her name on that list. I remember all those people who died because nobody stopped Helix soon enough. If I can help stop it from happening somewhere else, how can I not try?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "You're so much like her. Your mum, she had that same fire, that same inability to walk past injustice. But Emma, it cost her everything. I don't want it to cost you too." "It already cost me," Emma said quietly. "It cost me my mum. Working with the foundation, helping other people, that's how I make it mean something. That's how I keep her alive." Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. His daughter was 13 years old, and she'd already figured out what it had taken him 40 years to learn. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from transforming it into purpose. "Okay," he said softly, "but promise me you'll also be a kid sometimes. Go to dances, have sleepovers, do normal 13-year-old things." "I promise," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "Right after we finish the Pennsylvania case." They both smiled, and in that moment, Marcus saw the future. Emma wouldn't be a mechanic like him, or a field biologist like Sarah. She'd be something else entirely, something the world desperately needed. A bridge between victims and justice, a translator of suffering into action. And he would support her, protect her, and make sure she never forgot she was loved for who she was, not just for what she accomplished. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was released from federal prison in October of 2030 after serving 4 years of her 8-year sentence. Good behavior, continued cooperation with ongoing investigations, and her crucial role as a whistleblower had earned her early release. She walked out of the prison in Colorado wearing donated clothes and carrying a single bag of belongings, and the first thing she did was drive to Pine Ridge. She'd written to Emma and Marcus dozens of times during her incarceration, and they'd written back, a correspondence that had evolved from cautious formality to something approaching friendship. Emma had told her about school, about the Foundation's work, about her dreams of becoming an environmental lawyer. Marcus had shared his grief, his struggles, his gradual acceptance that Sarah's death had meaning beyond tragedy. And Dr. Mitchell had told them everything about her guilt, her therapy, her determination to spend the rest of her life making amends. Now she stood on the porch of the Foundation office, her hand hovering over the doorbell, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. The door opened before she could ring. Emma stood there, 13 now instead of 8, but with the same serious eyes that had stared at her in that underground facility. "Dr. Mitchell?" Emma said, and then, surprising them both, she stepped forward and hugged her. Sarah Mitchell broke down. She'd held herself together through the trial, through sentencing, through 4 years of prison routine. But this child's forgiveness shattered something inside her. She sobbed on the porch while Emma held her, this girl who had every reason to hate her choosing compassion instead. Marcus appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation, and quietly invited Dr. Mitchell inside. They sat in the conference room, the same room where Emma had helped Rachel Morrison build her case, and they talked. Really talked, for the first time without lawyers or prosecutors or prison glass between them. "I don't expect forgiveness," Dr. Mitchell said, her voice hoarse from crying. "What I did, what I was part of, it's unforgivable. But I want you to know that every day I work to be better than I was. I've been consulting with environmental groups from prison, helping them understand how corporations hide evidence. I've testified in 4 more cases. I'm trying to use what I know to prevent this from happening again." "We know," Marcus said. "We've been following your work. The case in Michigan, your testimony helped convict those executives." Dr. Mitchell looked surprised. "You've been following?" "We want to offer you a job," Emma said simply, "with the Foundation. We need someone who understands corporate structure, who knows how these cover-ups work, someone who's been on the inside." "Emma," Dr. Mitchell whispered, "I killed your mother." "No," Emma corrected, her voice firm. "Helix killed my mother. You were part of the system, yes. You should have stopped it sooner, yes. But in the end, you chose to help me. You gave me the evidence that brought them down, and you've spent 4 years trying to make it right. That matters." Marcus added, "We're not asking you to forget what you did. We're asking you to keep doing what you're doing, but with us, officially. Help us stop other companies before they poison more towns. Help us save people the way you couldn't save Sarah." Dr. Mitchell looked between them, this father and daughter who'd lost everything because of her complicity, and saw not hatred, but opportunity. They were offering her not forgiveness exactly, but something equally precious, a chance at redemption through action. "I'll do it," she said. Whatever you need, for as long as you'll have me. She started the next week, working from a small desk in the corner of the Foundation office. Her knowledge proved invaluable. She could spot falsified environmental reports within minutes, recognize shell companies designed to hide corporate liability, anticipate the strategies companies would use to intimidate whistleblowers. Within 6 months, the Foundation's success rate had doubled. They were finding cases earlier, building stronger evidence, protecting victims more effectively, and slowly, over shared case files and late nights piecing together corporate crimes, Dr. Mitchell became part of the family that had formed around Emma and Marcus. Not replacing Sarah, never that. But filling a space that had been empty, offering expertise and dedication and the kind of fierce loyalty that comes from knowing you've been given a second chance you don't deserve. The town of Pine Ridge continued to change. By 2032, 7 years after Emma's discovery, the population had stabilized at around 2,000. New businesses had opened, including a thriving eco-tourism industry. People came from around the world to visit the sealed facility, to see the memorial to the 47 victims, to stand where Emma Chen had emerged from underground with truth in her hands. The town embraced this new identity. They created the Pine Ridge Environmental Justice Museum, housed in the old community center, documenting not just their own story, but the broader history of corporate environmental crimes. School groups toured it, learning about the importance of whistleblowers, the dangers of unchecked corporate power, and the courage it takes to speak truth to authority. Emma spoke at the museum's opening ceremony in May. She was 15 now, poised and articulate, her mother's camera hanging from a strap around her neck as always. She stood before a crowd of 300 people, survivors and journalists and activists and ordinary citizens who believed that stories like Pine Ridge's needed to be remembered. 7 years ago, Emma began. I got lost in a blizzard. I was 8 years old, freezing and terrified. I found a ladder that led underground, and I thought I was looking for shelter. What I found instead was truth. The truth about how my mother really died. The truth about what had been done to this town. The truth about the difference between what corporations claim and what they actually do. She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. People ask me if I'm glad I went down that ladder. If I could go back, would I do it again? And the answer is complicated, because going down that ladder meant learning that my mum was murdered. It meant being hunted through tunnels by security guards. It meant years of trials and threats and watching my town tear itself apart. It meant losing my childhood in a lot of ways. The crowd was silent, hanging on her words. But it also meant my mother's death wasn't for nothing. It meant 47 murders were solved. It meant hundreds of sick people got treatment and compensation. It meant other towns, other communities, learned to watch for the same warning signs. It meant that corporate executives learned they're not untouchable. So, yes, I'd do it again. Because truth matters more than comfort, justice matters more than peace, and sometimes the scariest path is the only one worth taking. The applause was thunderous. People stood, some crying, others shouting their support. Emma saw her father in the front row, tears streaming down his face, pride written across every feature. She saw Dr. Mitchell sitting beside him, her hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking. She saw survivors she'd known her entire life, people who'd lost spouses and children and parents to R7 poisoning, all of them nodding as if she'd spoken something they'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. After the ceremony, a young girl approached Emma, maybe 9 or 10, clutching a notebook. "Miss Chen, can I ask you something?" Emma knelt down to her level. "Of course, what's your name?" "Lily. I live in Pine Ridge. My grandpa died from the poisoning before you found the facility." The girl's eyes were serious, too old for her face. "I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people and stop bad companies. How do I do that?" Emma thought carefully about her answer. "First, you stay curious. Ask questions. Notice when things don't make sense. Second, you document everything. Take pictures, keep records, write things down. Third, you find people you trust and you tell them what you found. And fourth, you stay brave even when people tell you you're too young or too small or wrong, because Lily, the most important changes often start with people who refuse to stay quiet. The girl nodded solemnly, wrote something in her notebook, then surprised Emma by hugging her tightly. Thank you. My grandpa would have liked you. Emma held her, this child who reminded her so much of herself 7 years ago, and whispered, I think I would have liked him too. The Foundation's work expanded. By 2033, they'd assisted in exposing 11 major corporate environmental crimes, resulting in over $8 billion in settlements for victims and significant reforms in environmental regulation. Emma, now 16, had been invited to speak at the United Nations Conference on Environmental Justice, sharing her story with delegates from 70 countries. She stood at the podium in Geneva, looking out at an audience of world leaders, environmental ministers, and corporate representatives, and she spoke not as a victim, but as an expert. She presented data on corporate accountability, discussed the systemic failures that allow environmental crimes to persist, and proposed specific policy reforms to protect whistleblowers and communities. We talk about climate change and pollution as if they're abstract problems, Emma said, her voice carrying through the vast hall. But they're not. They're concrete choices made by specific people in specific companies who decide that profit matters more than human life. My mother died because Helix Mining Corporation made that choice. 46 other people died. Hundreds more suffered. Not because of bad luck or natural causes, but because of decisions made in boardrooms by people who knew exactly what they were doing. She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of Pine Ridge before and after the exposure. But here's what gives me hope. Accountability is possible. Change is possible. When I was 8 years old, I thought I was powerless. I was a child against a billion-dollar corporation with armies of lawyers and politicians in their pocket. But I had something they didn't. Truth. And truth, when it's documented and shared and defended, is more powerful than all their money combined. The delegates gave her a standing ovation. Reporters swarmed her afterward, asking about her future plans, whether she'd run for office, what message she had for young activists around the world. Emma answered each question thoughtfully, but inside she was thinking about her mother, about what Sarah would say if she could see this moment, see how her death had sparked a movement that spanned continents. That night in her hotel room, Emma called her father. Dad, you still awake? For you, always. How'd it go? Good. Weird. I gave a speech to actual presidents and prime ministers, but all I could think about was Mom, about how she should be here instead of me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Baby, you're not instead of your mom. You're because of her. She started this fight. You're finishing it. That's not replacement. That's legacy. I miss her, Emma said, her voice cracking for the first time that day. I know. Me too. Every single day. But Emma, she'd be so proud of who you've become. Not because you're famous or important, but because you're exactly who she raised you to be. Brave, kind, and unwilling to accept injustice. They talked for another hour about everything and nothing, until Emma finally felt grounded enough to sleep. And thousands of miles away, Marcus sat in their kitchen on Maple Street, staring at a photograph of Sarah on the shelf and whispered, We did okay with her, didn't we? Our girl turned out pretty amazing. The following year, on the 10th anniversary of finding the ladder, Pine Ridge held a commemoration ceremony. Emma was 17 now, a senior in high school, already accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship to study environmental law. She'd grown into a confident young woman, her mother's features prominent in her face, her father's steadiness evident in her bearing. The ceremony was held at the memorial site, where the sealed facility entrance had been transformed into a place of reflection. The names of the 47 victims were carved in granite, surrounded by a garden maintained by volunteers. Hundreds of people attended, some who'd lived through the poisoning, others who'd been inspired by Emma's story, still others who worked in environmental justice and saw Pine Ridge as a turning point in the fight for corporate accountability. Marcus stood with Emma at the memorial, his arm around her shoulders. Dr. Mitchell stood on Emma's other side, her presence now accepted, if not fully embraced by the community. Together they laid white roses at Sarah's name, the same ritual they performed every year. 10 years, Emma said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a different lifetime. Both things are true, Marcus replied. Trauma does that, makes time strange. Emma touched her mother's name, tracing the letters carved in stone. I got into Stanford, full ride. I know, you told me last week, remember? I cried for an hour. Emma smiled. I'm scared, Dad, of leaving you alone, of leaving Pine Ridge, this place, this work. It's been my whole life since I was 8. And now you get to build a new life, Marcus said gently. One that includes this work but isn't consumed by it. You get to be a college student, make friends, date terrible boys I'll have to intimidate, all the normal stuff. What if I forget how to be normal? Baby, you were never normal. You were extraordinary from the day you were born. Stanford is lucky to have you, and I'll be fine. I've got the foundation, I've got Dr. Mitchell helping out, and I've got this whole town watching my back. Dr. Mitchell spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Emma, you saved me. Not just that night in the facility, but by giving me a chance to make amends. I owe you and your father everything. I'll help him run the foundation while you're gone. I'll make sure your mother's legacy continues. You go live your life, learn, grow, come back stronger. Emma hugged them both, these two people who'd become her family through tragedy and triumph. I'll come home every break, and I'll keep working with the foundation remotely. I'm not abandoning this. We know, Marcus said, but it's okay if you do sometimes. It's okay to just be 17. Your mom would want that for you. The ceremony began, and Emma was asked to speak. She approached the podium, looking out at the crowd of faces, some familiar, some strangers drawn by the story of the little girl who'd changed the world by refusing to stay silent. 10 years ago today, Emma began, I climbed down a ladder into darkness. I was looking for warmth, for shelter from a storm. What I found instead was a different kind of storm, one that had been raging secretly for 15 years. A storm of corporate greed and deliberate cruelty and systematic murder dressed up as business as usual. She paused, gathering her thoughts. These 10 years have taught me a lot. They've taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. They've taught me that age doesn't determine impact, that an 8-year-old with evidence is more powerful than a CEO with lawyers. They've taught me that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. She looked at the memorial, at her mother's name among the 46 others. But mostly, these 10 years have taught me about legacy. My mother died trying to expose what Helix was doing. She didn't succeed. But her death and the evidence she gathered and the courage she showed, all of that became the foundation for what came after. She didn't fail. She just didn't live to see the victory. Emma's voice strengthened. Every person whose name is on this memorial, they're not just victims. They're the reason we fought. They're the reason we won. They're the reason other towns are safer now, why corporations think twice before poisoning communities, why whistleblowers have more protection and support than ever before. Their deaths mattered. Their lives mattered. And we honor them not just by remembering, but by continuing the work they started. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the memorial. From her pocket, she pulled out her mother's old camera, the one she'd carried for 10 years, the one that had captured the evidence that started everything. She placed it gently at the base of the memorial, a symbolic offering. "Mom," she said, her voice barely audible but picked up by the microphone. "I'm going to college. I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm going to spend my life making sure what happened here never happens again. I hope that makes you proud. I hope you know that climbing down that ladder, following your path, it saved me. Not just that night, but every day since. I love you. I'll always love you." The crowd was silent, many crying openly. Then slowly, other people began to approach the memorial. Survivors laid flowers, children left drawings. A man placed a photograph of his wife who'd died from R7 poisoning. A woman left a letter to her father. One by one, they transformed the memorial from stone and names into something living, a testament not just to death, but to the resilience that follows. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, Emma stood with her father and watched the community she'd saved mourn and celebrate together. She thought about the girl she'd been 10 years ago, small and scared and frozen. She thought about the woman she was becoming, strong and determined and ready to fight battles her younger self could never have imagined. "Ready to go home?" Marcus asked eventually. Emma nodded, but as they walked to the truck, she looked back one more time at the memorial, at the garden, at the place where her childhood had ended and her purpose had been born. "Dad, do you think we made a difference?" Marcus followed her gaze, seeing not just the memorial, but everything it represented. The trials, the convictions, the foundation, the 11 other communities they'd helped, the reforms that had been implemented, the lives that had been saved. "Yeah, baby," he said quietly. "I think we made a difference." They drove home through the twilight, and Pine Ridge spread out around them, changed but surviving, scarred but healing. The hardware store where Marcus used to work had reopened under new ownership. The elementary school where Emma had been just another quiet kid now had an environmental science program funded by the foundation. The church where they'd mourned Sarah now hosted support groups for environmental crime survivors from around the country. The town had become something it was never meant to be, a symbol, a reminder, a warning and a hope all at once. Corporate executives touring facility sites now had to consider the possibility of another Emma Chen, another child with a camera and courage, another truth that refused to stay buried. Lawyers building cover-ups had to account for the fact that whistleblowers had more protection, more support, more reason to believe they might actually win. And in cities and towns across the world, young people who discovered injustice had a template for resistance. They knew it was possible. They knew one person could matter. They knew because Emma Chen, at 8 years old, had proved it. The years continued to pass. Emma graduated from Stanford at the top of her class, then Harvard Law. She returned to Montana not as a victim, but as one of the nation's leading environmental attorneys. She argued cases before the Supreme Court, won precedent-setting judgments, and became the youngest person ever to receive the Goldman Environmental Prize. But she never forgot where she started. Every summer, no matter how busy she became, she returned to Pine Ridge. She worked at the foundation her father still ran with Dr. Mitchell. She spoke at the museum. She laid white roses at her mother's memorial. And she reminded herself and others that heroism doesn't require superpowers or special training. Sometimes it just requires a child lost in a storm who makes the choice to climb down into darkness instead of giving up. Marcus grew older, his hair completely grey by the time Emma turned 30, his body worn by years of work and worry, but his spirit unbroken. He watched his daughter become everything Sarah had dreamed she might be and more. He watched her change laws, save communities, and inspire a generation of activists who saw environmental justice not as impossible idealism, but as achievable reality. And when Marcus died peacefully in his sleep at 73, surrounded by Emma and her own daughter, a bright-eyed girl named Sarah who'd inherited her grandmother's curiosity and her mother's courage, his last words were simple. "We did good. Your mum would be so proud." Emma held his hand as he slipped away, and she knew he was right. They had done good. Not perfect, not without pain, but good. They'd taken tragedy and transformed it into purpose. They'd taken loss and built legacy. They'd taken one child's desperate search for shelter and turned it into a movement that changed the world. The Sarah Chen Foundation continued long after Marcus was gone, now run by Emma with Dr. Mitchell as senior advisor and young Sarah learning the work just as Emma once had. They'd helped expose 119 corporate environmental crimes across 42 countries. They'd secured over $30 billion in victim compensation. They'd trained thousands of whistleblowers and protected hundreds of communities. But more than the numbers, more than the victories, they'd proved something fundamental, that truth matters, that courage matters, that one person, even a child, even someone small and scared and lost in the snow, can change everything if they're willing to climb into the darkness and bring light back out. Emma Chen's story became legend, told and retold, sometimes embellished, sometimes simplified, but always carrying the same essential truth. A little girl found a ladder going underground and discovered that the greatest treasures aren't gold or jewels, but truth and justice, and the courage to fight for them, even when the odds seem impossible. And on cold winter nights in Pine Ridge, when the snow fell thick and the mountains disappeared behind white curtains of storm, parents told their children about Emma, about how she got lost and found truth, about how she was small and became mighty, about how she turned tragedy into triumph and showed the world that heroes don't always look like we expect them to. They told the story not to frighten children, but to inspire them, to remind them that power doesn't come from size or age or wealth. It comes from refusing to accept injustice, from choosing courage over comfort, from believing that one voice speaking truth can shatter 1,000 lies. Anyone can change the world if they're willing to climb into the unknown and refuse to give up on what's right. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most truth. Sometimes the darkest places hide the brightest revelations. And sometimes getting lost is exactly how we find our way. As the morning sun rises over Pine Ridge, casting golden light across the memorial where 47 names are carved in stone, a new generation gathers to hear Emma Chen's story, not as history, but as instruction. Because for Emma, and for every person brave enough to follow her example, truth is never buried so deep that courage cannot reach it. Fear is never so great that determination cannot overcome it. And justice, no matter how long delayed, is always worth fighting for. Because some paths, no matter how dark, lead exactly where we need to go. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering truth and courage with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe one voice can change the world.